all for participating in this week's briefing session. We want to start by just reviewing updates from our last meeting. There were a couple of outstanding questions, as I recall. No, actually, I think we may have gotten answers to those. What we would like to have is from the chief's office, from police, an update on the police and protest interactions over the last weekend or so.
Madam President?
Yes.
I don't think that we got an update on the disaggregated numbers for the expenses that they've incurred so far.
I can't hear you.
I heard Councilmember Patterson, we did get that shortly before this meeting started, and it should be in your email right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Chief?
All right, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I think the best way to do it is perhaps go day by day, starting from last Monday, September 14th, until present day. And if you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask. On Monday, September 14th, there was a protest event that took place at Jefferson Avenue at the intersection of McCree. We estimated the crowd size at approximately 100 people. The protesters were very peaceful, held their event, which led to no police interaction. All we did was stay on the outskirts of the area to make sure we blocked traffic, to make sure the protesters remain safe. On Tuesday, September 15th, in the morning of
Chief,
Tuesday.
Excuse me. I have a quick question. What time did they stop protesting?
That evening at around 10 o'clock, people started to pack up. We saw people moving trash cans out of the roadway and put things together. And at around 10:30 that night, for the most part, most of the protesters were gone.
Thank you very much.
On Tuesday, September 15th, at around 9 o'clock in the morning, we had 150, we estimate 150 protesters arrived in front of the public safety building, where they conducted a protest event for about a half an hour and then walked over to City Hall. Once at City Hall, the protesters did declare that City Hall was going to be shut down until their demands were reached, at which point protesters began to block some of the entry and exit doors for the public safety building, began taking down flags in front of City Hall, and began to put up flyers and some paint onto the building. The police department had very little interaction with the protesters at that point, and at around 9 o'clock, as we monitored, there were about 100 people still at City Hall, where they had set up tents, blocking both the roadway and the sidewalks. They also had put locks and chains on the doors of the facility, to include duct tape around the door handles of the facility. And again, the police department did not respond. We just monitored to make sure that everyone remained safe. And when I mean everyone, protesters and the employees who left City Hall. And most of the employees left City Hall around 11 o'clock that morning. We go into Wednesday morning.
Chief, real quick. Chief, can I ask a question real quick?
Go ahead, Councilman.
Yes, thank you, Chief. So at the time, the duct tape and the locks or the chain locks and all of those things, because I was getting reports that there were people who were not allowed to leave the building. Are you saying the majority of people were gone at that time, or were there still some people, quote unquote, stuck inside of the building?
Yes, there were still people inside of the building, which made it very dangerous, as you can imagine, especially, if a fire had took place or there was an emergency reason to get out of that building quickly. We did work with city security as well as the mayor's office, to include the deputy mayor, to formulate a plan to muster all the employees and to have them leave the building at around the same time at 11 o'clock so that they wouldn't be into any additional danger or jeopardy.
Was there any collaboration or coordination with the fire department, being that, you know, this was a fire safety issue as well?
Yep, the cooperation was across multiple city departments to include DES, the fire department, city security, the police department, and the mayor's office.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I go on to Wednesday morning. Around 6:30 that morning, I received phone calls from city security of employees who were trying to enter into the building. The first 2 or 3 employees were allowed to enter the building without any altercations or problems. The second wave at around 7 a.m., who attempted to enter the building, we were advised by those employees, 4 individuals stood in front of the entry door and told the employees that needed to leave and go home because City Hall was shut down for the foreseeable future. As a result of that, city security did attempt to tell the men to leave so that the employees could enter the building, at which point they also told city security, no, we weren't leaving, the employees can go home, City Hall is shut down. At which point city security contacted me once again. Working with my command staff, we did formulate a plan, realizing that City Hall needed to be accessible to both employees and to the citizens of Rochester. There's a lot of business that needs to go on. Businesses need permits in order to function. People need to pay bills and taxes. People needed to get permits as well for various reasons, to include marriage license. There's a lot of business that the over 200,000 people in the city rely on at City Hall. We couldn't let 200 people shut it down for the rest of the city. So at around 8 o'clock in the morning, we did arrive at City Hall using our long-range acoustic device, excuse me. We did make announcements to inform the protesters. In fact, I have the announcement that was made that this is the Rochester Police Department. Employees and citizens need to access City Hall. You are blocking vehicular and pedestrian traffic to City Hall. You are hereby ordered to clear the street and sidewalk. Failure to disperse from the sidewalk and street immediately will result in your arrest. That was under disorderly conduct for impeding vehicular and pedestrian traffic because there were multiple tents, multiple sleeping bags, and people, again, blocking the sidewalks and the doors, preventing access into City Hall. There were a few protesters who formed a line with shields and disobeyed or disregarded the police department's warnings to clear the streets and sidewalks and allow access to that building. As a result, the police department made 17 arrests for disorderly conduct. Of those 17 arrests, no use of force that involved strikes or shoves or any impact was used for those protesters, nor did we use any type of munitions to include OC spray, pepper ball, or tear gas. We made the arrest that we have to make in accordance with disorderly conduct in New York State penal law, after which most, if not all, of the people arrested received appearance tickets as a result. At around 10 o'clock, or 11 o'clock, excuse me, City Hall, for the most part, was readily accessible. I should mention and thank Reverend Brown. We were talking to her throughout the day, and I know some of the media outlets covered the assistance that she gave us to make sure things remained peacefully and orderly. Also, members of the protesters also helped assist us with cleaning up some of the items on the sidewalk. Reverend Brown did a great job mediating the situation, explaining to protesters the emergent need for fire truck or emergency services to get through unimpeded, and also for employees and citizens, their ability to access City Hall. So I thank her for her hard work, and I also thank our officers for doing the job that they did, commendable, with showing a lot of restraint throughout that morning. Throughout that night, there were approximately
I have a
100.
question. Sorry, I have a couple of questions about the morning response.
Okay.
So I've spoken about this already over email, but I just want to get some clarifications about when the protesters were arrested, what happened to their belongings. I'm collecting a list of ones who were arrested, but they were never reconnected with their belongings. And in talking with you, there's no record of their belongings. And for me, that's very troubling in terms of, keys and cell phones that were on their person now not being able to be found. And, the difficulty with the public safety building being closed, getting access to their things. Wondering if you can comment on that.
Yep, so I'll reiterate what I told you on the email response to that very same question. If there are individuals who are arrested and can no longer find their property, to please contact our professional standards section office so we can look into the matter to determine if the property can be found or if the officers acted inappropriately.
So I guess the clarity would be around if that many people have had the same experience, where is the system breaking down here? And, protesters obviously are at a power disadvantage to file a complaint. It could also go nowhere. So I understand that that's the system in place, but I guess I really want to know what's happening here.
I don't know if I understand your question. Do you want me to talk about the system? Can you repeat your question?
Well, I guess I'm highlighting that it's very concerning that so many people have had items lost. And so the existing system, I'd like, once we get their complaints filed, I'd like an update on that to make sure that they're followed up on.
Any complaint that we receive at our professional standards section office is followed up on, and we will make sure we look into the matter.
Okay. There was video of a protester being chased. Wondered if you could elaborate on why that happened.
Yep, so we did use our mobile field force line to inform the protesters that they had to, again, move from blocking the streets and sidewalks. We did use tactics according to our training, and that's the reason you saw our officers taking action.
I don't think that explains why one person was targeted and chased. To me, granted, I don't have the training, but it looked like an officer broke formation to go after someone. And I just wanted to know, was that an order that was given? What was the justification?
Yeah, so we are not going to talk about specific strategy and tactics in the public forum.
Okay, I'll follow up over an email with that. 2 more questions. One, what would be the trigger to, right now we've had a couple of days where the protesters are still at City Hall, but they're not blocking the streets. So what would the instance be to trigger the order to disperse?
When they are creating an unsafe environment, when they are blocking access for emergency personnel to respond to a building where there are hundreds of people who work there or visit, when they are preventing employees and citizens from accessing a public area, then they have to allow space for other citizens who aren't involved in the protest to still conduct their business, as well as employees to still go to work. Okay.
Final question. It seemed like in the beginning of using the LRAD system to order the dispersal that at first the media was told to disperse. And then maybe it seemed like it was corrected, but just wanted to clarify, the media do not need to disperse in these instances. They can still stay and film, correct?
So the media was never told to disperse in advance. What the media was given was a staging area if they wanted to film in a safe place, which is really at the intersection of Church and Fitzhugh, not out of the vicinity of City Hall. And the media can stay anywhere the public is allowed to stay, but the media, just like the public, aren't allowed to block streets and sidewalks to impede people entering into City Hall, so they would have to also follow the order.
Well, with the media being on the sidewalk, when the order to disperse is given, that sidewalk is now no longer able to be occupied by the public, correct?
I don't understand your question. The order to disperse is given when the sidewalk is being blocked, impeding people's ability to walk up and down the sidewalk. It's my understanding no media person was arrested and that the media did comply with the lawful order.
I guess I'm just trying to understand the media's ability to film once a dispersal order is given.
The media can film wherever
like
they like.
It seemed like a different tactic that was taken from other days that I've seen, that the media are able to film, freely. But on Wednesday morning, they were kind of corralled. But originally, the LRAD announced that they would have to disperse. So I just wanted clarity.
Yeah, that's untrue. The LRAD did not announce that the media had to disperse. I read to you exactly what the LRAD message said. It was nothing about the media. In the past, when working with our media partners, they have asked in the past to please provide them with a location for a media staging area. So we did comply with that and said, hey, the media staging area could be at the corner of Fitzhugh and Church Street. We never gave them any orders to not be on the sidewalk or not record any more than what we would have told the public. So I don't understand where your question or your concern is coming from. It just didn't happen.
Okay, I think that's maybe not the narrative. And so if you could provide the recording or what was said over the LRAD, I think that could help clear some
I just read exactly what was said. Do you need me to repeat it, Councilwoman?
I think we can move on. We can move on.
Can I just ask one follow-up to Councilmember Lupien's question?
Sure.
Chief Simmons, I understand Councilmember Lupien asked about the officer who chased the individual person. I understand that you talked about not wanting to talk about specific strategies or I forget the exact term you used. Can I just ask for clarity? Did that officer who chased the individual, is that acting according to protocol?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a couple of quick questions. They're very quick and they're procedural questions. Council President.
I hope they can hear you better than I can.
No, can't hear you.
Okay,
Mike.
can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, well, hang on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, so here are my procedural questions. So for the protesters that were arrested, they were arrested. Upon arrest, were they searched? Correct.
According to law, anytime, and our policy for that matter, anytime we arrest an individual, we do search them for property and or weapons.
Okay, so they were searched. Were there items taken and placed in evidence bags?
I can't say firsthand. That's typically the procedure, and that's what follows. And that evidence is then turned into property or returned to the individual who was arrested.
Okay. Do you gather their names during the search prior to placing them in prisoner transport?
We do.
All right. Are the names then placed on the evidence bags for their items?
That is our process, correct.
Okay, so based upon standard procedure, it shouldn't be a problem to find any item that was not given to them upon release.
Based on our procedures, correct.
All right, thank you, sir.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, President Scott. Chief, could you please clarify, you mentioned that they were given appearance tickets. Were they given appearance tickets and released, or were they transported and then given appearance tickets and then released?
The individuals were transported to the Monroe County Jail facility in Henrietta so that they can be processed. Part of the arrest procedures is to confirm identity and to also conduct fingerprints and photos. That can be done prior to arraignment, or it can be done after arraignment. The decision was made to do it prior. Some individuals did request not to have their fingerprint photos taken until after arraignment, at which point we gave them their appearance tickets. Others were processed and then received their appearance ticket.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions regarding the interaction with protests? If not, I'd like to move to something else right quick.
I actually do have one more about the process.
Yes, Councilmember Wilkie.
Thank you. So I know we talked about this over email as well, but with the phone, can you, I don't think I quite understand the procedure around offering a phone call, because some of the protesters had their phones taken and were transported to Henrietta. Some of them had to walk back because they didn't have a way to contact someone to pick them up. In that instance, is it a courtesy for the processing facility to offer the ability to use the phone, or is it only in certain circumstances that it's mandated?
Yeah, so if you're asking me about the processing facility, that's the Monroe County Jail. I don't necessarily know their policies. I would imagine as a courtesy that they would allow people to use the phone, but I was not there, so I can't speak firsthand if anyone ever asked to use the phone.
Got it, thank you.
I would like to take a moment to thank you, Chief Simmons and the officers for their work with the shooting, that really, really tragic shooting over the weekend. To thank you all for your outstanding work with that, and to ask if there are any updates regarding that situation.
So there aren't any new updates aside from what we provided on Sunday. I know I had an opportunity to talk to media on, Saturday. Had an opportunity to talk to media earlier Saturday morning, and then Captain Ombrino talked later that evening to provide the information that we know, that we are able to release to the public. I will say that our investigators and our officers are working hard to follow up every lead, to leave no stone unturned. As you mentioned, this was a very tragic event in our city, and it affected our officers as well as it affected this community. So we're doing everything that we can, working around the clock to bring this to a successful resolution. But I do thank you for acknowledging the officers' hard work, and we're going to continue working hard to bring this case to a, again, successful resolution.
Madam President?
One additional question. Vice President Lightfoot, is it about this?
Yes. I just wanted to expound on the fact that I got a lot of positive feedback from community partners who were on the scene that night that said you, Interim Chief Simmons, and your staff did an amazing job working with Pathways to Peace, Clergy on Patrol, all of the community partners that were there that night. I really want to commend you guys for that work. But I also want to ask this additional question. We know we have, by the time that I spent on the fire department, I know we have different programs that we're allowed to use. But I want to ask, are you making sure that you guys are self-caring for the officers that were involved? We have these counseling services for the public, but what about the officers? And I know oftentimes we don't tend to want to utilize those services because of the stigma that comes around them. But I really, really, really want to implore that folks are self-caring and talking to each other and the officers to make sure that they're seeking those services. And have you guys done a debrief as a result of this, sir?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Councilman Lightfoot. And yes, we have been telling our supervisors to monitor our staff members who did respond to the scene and witness this very traumatic event. Like I mentioned earlier, it becomes very personal for our officers, and it affects them in a very personal way. It's not something that you see every day, the casualties that were suffered over on Pennsylvania Avenue. So as a command staff, even this morning, we were talking about our OAP program, which is our Officers Assistance Program. similar to most employees will have an employer's assistance program, to make sure our counselors are readily available to assist officers who, may be suffering with anxiety or asking questions why and need someone to talk to in order to process what they witnessed over the weekend. In addition to that, starting next week, we have our annual in-service where the topic of discussion, along with other training, is going to be on peer support, letting our officers know suicide prevention and awareness, to recognize the signs of other officers who may be struggling, and paths to receive counseling and services if needed.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Just a question on that topic, real quick.
Yes.
Chief, is there a way to compel the officers who responded to touch base with the counselor? I mean, there are a lot of folks out there who believe that they ain't got no problems and they're tougher than tough. And that stuff slides through the armor, and the next thing you know, you got a problem, you got an issue. Are you compelling? Can you compel the folks who responded to at least check in 15, 20 minutes with a counselor just to say, hey, what's going on with you?
Yeah, so our policies only are very strict in when we can compel people to see OAP, and they largely are surrounded when an officer is involved with an officer-involved shooting. Now, with that being said, there are times where we bring the counselors to the officers. So we'll have OAP show up to the roll call of those officers of the shift, of those officers that responded, and tell the officers, hey, you need to stand by and talk to the counselors, give the clinicians an opportunity to discuss the services that they can provide and encourage officers to go. There are also times where our supervisors can monitor, and I mentioned that earlier, to monitor their officers to see, hey, there's a change in behavior that may be associated with, what they witnessed last weekend. In the event of that, a supervisor can compel an officer to go and seek counseling. But it becomes very delicate, because when you compel someone to seek counseling, if they're not willing to accept that counseling, all they will do is go there and say, nope, I'm all set, I'm fine. No one gains anything from it. So we try to encourage, try to demonstrate the signs that they may not even recognize that they're suffering and going through. And again, through our peer support, having their fellow officer monitor them as well as a force multiplier to say, hey, I think you need help. I think you need to talk to someone. So we are working on that.
All right. Thank you, sir.
And one final question for me is.
I have one as well, President Scott, after you.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Okay. Chief Simmons, I want to echo what President Scott and Vice President Lightfoot said. I appreciate you and everyone else being there on the scene. I'm not sure if the comments made by Captain Umbrino were formal comments by the department, or if that was just Captain Umbrino himself. But there was a lot of talk. Listened to the press conference about. It seemed like some disgust at some politicians talking about gun laws, and then he said something along the lines of how there's a lot of gun laws that aren't enforced. I really didn't follow exactly what he was referring to. Can you help me understand what are the gun laws that are not being enforced that he was referring to?
If you saw the same press briefing that I saw, Captain Umbrino actually corrected himself and said, in fact, we are enforcing gun laws. So I think I suggest, maybe taking a look one more time and following his comments. But his comments were formal comments and are supported by me as well.
Okay, so what you're saying is I should go back, get the kind of word for word of what Captain Umbrino was saying, and any questions about the specific comments he had, I can maybe just send an email to you, and I'll even copy him if you'd like, and just try to understand what specifically he was referring to.
Yes, I suggest that you please send the email to me or my staff, and then we can certainly pass that on to Captain Umbrino and try to provide clarification for you, sir.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't acknowledge that the mayor is not able to join us today, but we are graced with the presence of the deputy mayor. So we are about out of time, but I did want to ask if we can get information regarding personnel in terms of retirements, et cetera, the numbers, what those look like compared to a year ago. If you could provide that to us either in between or at our next briefing.
We can certainly do that.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think that concludes our
I'm sorry, I have a question. I'm sorry.
yes, Councilmember Pio.
So Chief, I know that during certain events, you see a lot of these things out there recording everything, and there's a lot of cooperation with gathering evidence. Do you see that same type of cooperation in other areas where we really need the intel in order to capture the people who do wrong? In this case right now, the shootings that happened the other night, have you been able to get any kind of evidence out there, video evidence from people that were there?
So you raise a very good point. The police department, without the help of the community coming forward and providing information and sharing tips and video, it'd be very difficult for us to do our job. We did locate witnesses the night of the event or early morning of the event who have been cooperative with providing information. I won't go into specifics as far as what evidence we've collected, as this is an ongoing investigation. But yes, we try to look at every possible opportunity or pathway of evidence that can help us solve any crime.
So when people bring up the issue of low percentage of crimes being solved, is it our belief that maybe we should have more help in that instance from the community?
I think you'll never hear me say that, we don't need community help. I'm always going to ask for more help from the community. So if the question is, can we use more? Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think that concludes our briefing for today. Thank you all for participating. So we are adjourned.